today we have very special guests. One of the co-founders of Gathering for Gartner, Mark Ducati, is going to be moderating this session. I hand over to you, Mark.
Hello, everybody. Today, it's my pleasure to be speaking with Eddy Goldfarb and his daughter, Lynn. And Eddy is a legend in the toy industry who I've known for maybe more than 30 years. And he's created, you may not know his name, but you certainly know his products. And Lynn has done a really wonderful documentary on Eddy, which we will show a little trailer of. And it actually won awards already. And hello, Lynn, do you want to say hello to everybody?
Hi, I'm happy to be here and happy to share the film.
And Eddy, do you want to say hello to everybody?
Hello, hello.
So that they could see your voice. There's Eddy. So we'll get right into playing the trailer. And here is the trailer of the film.
I always knew I was going to be an independent inventor, and I chose toys. This is the bubble gun in action. I got the idea for the chattering teeth. I saw a magazine ad for a tooth garage. It was a big hit right from the start, and this is what it does. When I first get an idea of something, I visualize how I'm going to build it step by step. And when it comes to toys and games, anything can give me an idea. I think that when you do creative work, you stimulate your brain, and that helps keep your body healthy.
As everybody just saw, probably the most famous thing that everybody knows is the chattering teeth. Of course, they know other things, but Eddy, do you remember when you invented them? About what year would that have been that you did the chattering teeth?
Oh boy, I'm not sure. I think maybe 48 or something.
1948. Wow. Do you remember playing with toys when you were a little kid? Do you remember playing with toys yourself?
I had very few toys. I had an erector set, number 4, an erector set. That was the first set that had a motor, an electric motor. But outside of that, I don't remember. But I made a few toys. I never thought I was going to end up inventing toys. I wanted to be an independent inventor. And I chose toys during the war because I felt that would be the easiest for me to get into since I had no money.
But you knew that you wanted to be some kind of inventor, so you must have been very creative when you were growing up or young. So, yeah,
I was kind of. I made all kinds of things. I had no real tools or shop, but I managed. I would go to a machine shop and ask them to make a part for me, and they were very nice and usually did it without charging me.
And you were born and grew up in Chicago, so that's where you
exactly, yeah,
started out, right? Mm-hmm. Now, since this whole thing is about Martin Gardner, the celebration of mind, I know we spoke about it. You weren't clear about who Martin was, but you do remember reading his columns in the Scientific American, right?
Oh, every month. I read Scientific American religiously, and I did read his columns.
Right. And one of the things that Martin Gardner did was make mathematics fun. So he wrote about, instead of writing about math, he wrote about games and puzzles and magic, and he brought it to a very wide audience. So I understand the first 3 toys that you invented were educational toys, but in the toy business, educational toys aren't really looked at upon a very popular category. Maybe you want to talk about that a little bit? Your first 3 toys that you tried to sell and how you try to get into that category?
Those three toys I designed on my submarine during the war, and they were all educational toys. And I had no idea that at that time the toy industry was not involved, not interested in educational items. They became interested many, many, many years later. But I almost sold one of the items. I went to a woman who had a small toy manufacturer in Chicago during the war. She made a very clever item. She got used rubber and she made little molds, and then she gave you a little bag of plaster of Paris, and you would cast them in the molds and then you would paint them. And I showed her my three items, and she said, "I'll take that one." And I said, "Wonderful, but you have to take the other two also." I was very inexperienced, very foolish. And she said, "No, I just want that one." And I said, "No, it's a line. I can't separate the line." And I thought it was really easy because this is the first toy manufacturer that I showed an item to. And she was enthusiastic about this one item. And so I took all three. And as I've told people, if anyone's interested, they're still available.
That's
The toy industry was
funny.
not interested.
Now, you were one of the first people to like sell ideas to toy companies, license an idea. You opened up the whole area for many people in the future about, in other words, the way it works in the toy industry is almost like an author with a book. You show something to a toy company on speculation, and if they like it, they give you an advance and a royalty. You get a royalty on it. So back in 1948, in the late 40s, nobody really was doing that. So you really created an industry for all of us, including myself, which I thank you for.
Good. I'm glad.
But so anyway, what are some of your favorite toys that you invented that you did yourself?
Let me see, there were hundreds of them. But the vacuum form was a wonderful item, the vacuum form. The teeth, of course. But the first three items that I did were all very big successes. And there was a little chicken that laid 5 eggs.
Really well.
And then the merry-go sip, that was a drinking glass that encouraged children to drink milk. We know this because their mothers wrote beautiful letters to us, but the drinking glass had a merry-go-round on top and a straw coming out of it. And as you drank the milk, the merry-go-round went around. And this was a big hit at the toy show and made all the newspapers. And so my first toy show was very successful. The teeth were there also.
And that would have been in New York, the toy show. You came to New York for the toy show.
Right, yeah.
Traditionally, the toy shows have always been there. Actually, might be a good time just to share the screen for another moment. I'll show a PowerPoint of a few of the photographs, and you can speak over the photographs also if you like. Okay, there they are, the famous teeth.
Yep.
There's a game, Kerplunk. I mean, many of us, including myself, have played it when I was a little kid. That's a classic. And
that was done with Rene Soriano, who came to me years ago and was with me for many years.
That's a real classic toy. I mean, it's still selling today, obviously.
Right.
And of course, Battling Tops. I mean, this is just,
right.
Do you remember working on this?
Yes, of course. Rene and I did this item, yes.
Arcade basketball. That's what was the idea about this? Well, obviously, we can see.
Well, I copied the arcade basketball games, which cost thousands of dollars, and I had the idea of hanging it on your door, the door to your bathroom or whatever. and then attaching it to the back of a chair. So we made a very, very expensive item into a very, very inexpensive item. And that also was a very successful items. And I sold that to John Osher.
Oh,
John Osher and his
was that Cap
girlfriend.
Toys at the time? Cap Toys. Yeah.
He just started,
Mhm.
and his first item was a flop. And he came to me with Bonnie, his girlfriend, and I showed him this item, and it was a success. So that's how he really got started.
That's great. Numbers Up, that's another classic game.
Right.
Any comments on this?
Nothing special. I think my wife worked with me on this one.
Now, did you generally prefer, do you have a preference between designing games or toys or
Not really. I like them all. I like action games.
action games, right?
Yeah, as against board games. And but I was always excited about toys.
Now, sometimes people, when they invent, they start from like a name and other times they start from a principle, from a mechanism or something. How do you approach a new idea, or where do they come from, your ideas?
It's hard to say, but it wasn't the name. It was usually an idea. I saw something or read something or thought that it was working on something else, and the idea would come.
Spiral designer. That's
Oh yeah, I did that. I can't tell you when, but
right.
years ago. Yeah, it was a wonderful item.
Brunswick air hockey. Tell me about that. Did you invent this is the air hockey? Wow.
Yeah, no, I didn't invent air hockey. Brunswick invented.
So they had a big
hockey.
thing and that would appear in bars and things like that. Is that right?
That's it. Costs a couple $1,000. So I designed the toy version, and I went to them, and they loved it, and so that came out as a toy.
But this was the first, like miniaturization of a toy version.
Yes,
or something like
yes,
this. Yeah.
yes, yes.
I played with that. I remember this toy great. It was a lot of fun. Now this is Stompers. Stompers still sells today, and it's a really big. But why don't you explain the idea? What is the idea of the toy Stompers? What does it do? It's a truck.
Well, Stoppers is a powerful little vehicle, runs on one AA battery. It's very powerful, and it could run up a hill easily, and it could pull things. And it was a very, very successful item.
So there were trucks that would go on their own, but they wouldn't be able to go up a hill or pull something because they didn't have.
And they were all big. This was a miniature one, and they were copies of real vehicles, but they were exaggerated copies. The wheels would be bigger, the body looked sturdier and tougher, and maybe even a little shorter. So they weren't hobby kits. They weren't hobby copies of vehicles, but you could still recognize it as a copy of a big vehicle that was out on the market.
So something like this, how long did you work on it before you presented it? And so was it something you worked a long time on, or?
Well, the usual time. By that time, I had a wonderful staff, and but above all, I had a wonderful designer, a car designer, an actual car designer, Del Everett, who went to Art Center in LA and then went to Detroit and worked for the auto industry, and then came back and started his own design company, and wasn't doing that well. I was using him on my overflow of designing. I gave him projects. He had two people beside himself. So I finally bought them. I bought them and brought them into my place. Two of them came into my place, Del Everett, and I forgot the other fellow's name. He became a model maker. And the third one went to another design company. But Del Everett was the heart and soul of Stompers.
The vacuform machine, again, it looks like you took something that existed and miniaturized it.
I built my own vacuum form for our prototype shop. That was a big one, you know, I mean, a huge one. And you could buy one for $5,000 or $6,000. So I got the idea of making a miniature one for a toy. And I took that to Mattel. And this has a funny story. I took it to Mattel. And for my heater, I used a light bulb. And I went to see Elliot Handler. And I put it on his desk and we turned it on. And he saw it happen and he got very excited. He went out to call Ruth, his wife, and they both loved it right then. But the light bulb was on and went down and burned his desk.
Well,
and I was very embarrassed. And he said, "Don't worry about it, don't worry about it." and they bought it on the spot.
I have some questions already from the chat related to the vacuum form. I guess it's also how the idea came about to build that.
Well, I used a vacuum form, a big one, which we built. I couldn't even afford to buy a commercial one. So we built, I mean, it had a base like 6 feet, you know, by 3 feet. It was really a big one. It worked beautifully. And we used it for making toy models. And I thought it'd be a great idea to make it into a toy. And it became a very successful toy for Mattel. And even I got letters from commercial labs and places like that who used it in their own labs for making small parts.
So it was, the heat came from just from the light bulb, or was there another source of heat?
Oh no, the first prototype that I made had a light bulb, and that got hot enough to soften the plastic. Mattel, especially after I burned the desk, I put in a regular heating element. But I was it was easier for me to put in a light bulb, and I could even vary the heat with a variac, you know, control the voltage to the light bulb. So I never expected to use a light bulb in the final one. It would be a heating element, but it would have to be designed and made special, you know.
Creator, a Lego game. This, the Koosh, this everybody knows, the giant bubble gum. You want to talk about that a little bit? What was your inspiration, or how did you start this?
Oh, okay. This has got a story too. I made the item just exactly as you see it, but all the balls were the same size. And one of my designers really said, "No, we've just got to make one bigger and smaller and smaller," and we did. And that's the exact item that I showed. And I showed it to Mattel, and I showed it to Hasbro, and I showed it to Ideal, and every company I could. And they all turned it down, and they said, "Why would anyone buy a bubble gun for $3, $4, $5 when they can buy a bottle of bubble soap for 39 cents. And so I just couldn't sell the item, and in walked John Osher. Again, I had sold him the basketball game the year before. And he came to see me with his girlfriend, Bonnie. They weren't married yet. And I showed him the item, and he reacted exactly the same way as Elliot Handler. It says, why would anyone pay that kind of money when they can buy a bottle of bubble fluid? And Bonnie, his girlfriend, spoke up, and this is exactly what she said. She said, John, you're going to make that item. And he says, no, I'm not. He said, John, you're going to make that item. And by the end of the meeting, he said, okay, I'll make the item. And he did make it. And I came to see him the first day at Toy Show, but it was later in the day. And he said, we've got a hit. And he said, at the beginning of the day, I was hoping to sell enough of them to pay for my investment in tooling. And he said, I've already ordered 3 more molds. And it was a huge, huge success.
Isn't it very funny how
started many industries making bubble machines for kids, you know.
Right. Yeah, I know that since then there were a lot of bubble toys, but isn't it, when you look at this, it just seems like a natural and it seems so obvious, but yet you had such a hard time to sell it. At that time, it wasn't obvious. Okay, well, Shark Attack, that's a famous game.
That's Martin's game.
Yeah, Martin is your son, right? And he works with
Yes.
you now. He's continuing your business. Right?
Yeah, he's been my partner for many, many years, and he takes care of everything and does everything and travels and what have you.
So your business continues.
This turned out to be a wonderful item.
This was a very big hit. It's still selling today, I think.
Yes, yeah.
So, today it's a whole different game with technology and everything, with 3D printers and everything. Do you think, I know that you've embraced some of the technology, but do you think that we're losing anything with hands-on inventing? Why don't you talk about what it was like to invent back many years ago in the 1930s and 40s when you started compared to today?
Well, you got to remember, there were always wonderful toy inventors, but they worked as employees for the toy companies.
Okay.
I was the first one that was independent and went from one company to another. And at first, it was the reception wasn't that great, except when I met companies like Mattel, who really encouraged me and Ideal. But then they realized that the outside inventor brought them a new perspective, a new way of looking at it. So all of a sudden they embraced, by that time there were many toy inventors, and they welcomed us.
What about the actual process of building prototypes and things like that? A lot of inventors just use a computer and draw it up on a computer screen and get a 3D print. And isn't part of building the process of inventing for you when things happen?
Well,
like
at the very beginning, I had no one else, of course, and I made the teeth sitting on a table in the kitchen of my friend. I didn't have a place to live. It was right after the war and you couldn't find a place to live. And I had no money anyway. And I carved it. And but that time we had casting plastics that was just coming in. So that made it, and I utilized casting. For example, I carved the gums and then cast a block into the gums and then carved the teeth. So I had a perfect fit, and I never wanted to paint the teeth white. I didn't want the teeth to be molded in one piece. So everything was done, of course, by hand, and
and then the motor, the little wind-up motor in there, you took away.
I found it somewhere. I found it in something. I can't remember what. I found it in some kind of item. Maybe it was a toy, I'm not sure. And I believe it was a motor from Germany. I can't remember, but I found a motor, so that I was very, very lucky. The first machine I was able to buy was a lathe, and then finally I was able to get a mill, a vertical mill. But I was finally able to hire a real model maker. And that was a big thing. And so I ended up with 6 or 7 tremendous model makers.
Well, but I think you're a pretty great model maker. I mean, to do what you've done.
I'm kind of a half-ass model maker, but I get by.
Do we have some questions from outside in the audience? Anybody watching? Tiago?
Someone asks if you could tell us a little bit more about your experience working with Marvin Glass.
By this time, I was married, and as I said, I learned as much as I could about casting plastics, and I said that other companies could probably use this process. And so my wife and I wrote 17 letters, and we sent them out to 17 different companies, and like advertising agencies and different manufacturing companies. And one of them was sent to, Marvin Glass was trying to manufacture toys at that time. In fact, he was advertising a Christmas tree ornament, which he advertised at a bad time. The item I thought was very good, but was at a bad time, much earlier than Christmas, and was a complete flop. But he had a little toy pig. And when I said that you can make copies of it for much, much less than making the original. And he called me and in his own blustering way said, I want 100 copies of anything I give you. And I called my wife and I said, our problems are over. This crazy guy called, he wants 100 copies of anything he gives me. And he gave me this little pig. And I made about, I don't know, 10 or 20 of them. And as I tell people, to this day, he never paid me a penny.
So for the people that don't know who Marvin Glass was, Marvin Glass was kind of a promoter and a real showman. And he created a company, Marvin Glass Company, which was in Chicago in LaSalle Street. And he had many inventors, and their company invented many of the top toys also, Mr. Machine and other products like that for many years. But he was really just a promoter. But or maybe would you call him like a P.T. Barnum, or even, or because there are many stories about Marvin.
Yeah, really. I always felt he should have been in the movie industry. You know, he was a very good promoter, and I had the teeth. I made the teeth, and I showed it to him, and he liked it. And he said, I know someone, and which I didn't. And he knew Irving Fishlove of making those kind of toys for adults. And he took it to Irving Fishlove, and Irving Fishlove bought it on the spot. And that's how our relation started. And that's it. It was a big hit from the beginning. And Irving called me secretly to help him make some more models and things like that, because he didn't want to work with Marvin. And so I made that for him, and he paid me, I don't know, 30, 40 bucks at that time, which was very good. That was good money at that time. And so that's the story. And then Marvin and I were together. We were partners, but he was a promoter. He was the one who saw the companies. And I knew I wanted to be independent, as I was when I met him. And he was a little hard to work with. And I finally told him that I'm leaving and going to California. My wife Anita, had our heart set of going to California. And we packed up a station wagon and put Lynn in the back seat. She was 2 years old and headed for California. And Marvin never sent me a penny after that. He held up my royalties. He was very, very upset.
So speaking about Lynn, I think it's time for a question for you. I mean, what was the experience like making a documentary of your father, and maybe how did that come about?
Well, I've been making documentaries my whole working life as a documentary filmmaker. And a couple of years ago, I said, I'm always looking for interesting people and interesting stories. And I realized that, that my dad had a very interesting story. And, but I first started out really doing kind of a family legacy project. And I realized that it really would be a great little film. And so it's been great. I really got to know my father in a different way, making the film about him. And both having the opportunity to talk about the items, tell the stories of his life, but also the real privilege of watching him work, and being able, to just to see him working in his machine shop or in other parts of the house, because he didn't really do it around us otherwise. So we didn't really have that chance. And, it's just a wonderful,
So growing up, he had a separate office that he would go to.
He went out. Yeah. So, and everybody says, what was it like, growing up with all these toys? Well, we did get to play with toys as prototypes and try them out.
So you were the test.
We were the testers, and we were sworn to secrecy.
Oh,
we weren't allowed
you
to.
had to sign a non-disclosure, right?
Non-disclosure. My dad had a locked room in the house that none of us were allowed in, where all the items were. And then he went off every day to work in his shop. He had a shop outside of the home where he had other people working with him. So in a certain way, he went off to work like, most parents that went out to work outside of the house. But there was a period of, one of the things I remember, there was a period of, for a while, he was making the little premiums in cereal boxes.
Right.
And I do remember that we used to get tons of cereal sent to us, because that was one. I don't think we got as many toys as we got cereal sent to us.
I made premiums for Kellogg's. That was the little toys that went into the box, and and then I made some where you sent in $3 in a box top, and I made them with another promoter, Hank Saperstein, and we were very successful at that. But Kellogg's decided they were spending too much money on premiums, and so they just printed puzzles and things like that on the back of a cereal box. But we made the first one we sold them. I invented this tiny little water gun, and they bought it for 2 cents, packaged to put in the cereal box, and it cost us a penny. So it was very, very successful.
So Lynn, I'm sure everybody would like to see the full documentary. Could you talk about how that will work, or how they could actually see the documentary?
Sure. Well, it's a documentary short. It's 18 minutes, and it's right now showing at film festivals. We will release it to the public through, probably broadcast or streaming and for educational use. But right now, it is playing at 3 more festivals in October and November. And because they're all virtual, you can actually go and sign up and see it at any of these festivals. It's on our website called eddysworld.net, Eddys World, all one word. And you also can sign up there on our mailing list, and we'll let you know as soon as it's available.
And it won an award the first time around.
Right. No, it's great. It won best short documentary at the Port Townsend Film Festival, and also a jury award for best documentary at Raw Science Film Festival. So it's really interesting for me because it's kind of both reaching a general audience, but science lovers really love the film because of the basis, the scientific basis, the basis of physics, and that are in a lot of my dad's toys.
Where can educators reach out? How can educators reach out about screening?
You should contact me directly. You can contact me on the website, or you could contact me at Lynn, Lyn, at eddysworld.net, EDDYS world.net. And I actually am very, very interested in educational use for the film. And we're doing our first educational screening next week, next Wednesday at Cal Lutheran University. And it's involving students from a number of different classes, from science to entrepreneurship, to media. And I'm very excited, actually, because it'll be a student Q&A, and we'll get a really good sense of how it's working with universities.
Lynn, you actually, this film came about because Nancy Blackman.
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit. That's our connection. It was a coincidence.
Well, it's a great, it was great fortuitous meeting. I actually met her through, films are very hard to get going, and very hard to get funded, and very hard to get support, especially because I'm an independent filmmaker, which I learned from my dad as being an independent inventor. And I think one of the things I really learned from my father was to be creative, to have ideas, to be able to pursue them, and don't let any obstacles, stand in the way, or at least figure out how to overcome them. And he's, always been an optimist, and he's really instilled the idea and, and the whole belief and optimism. And so I was making this little film about my father, and really not knowing whether it would go beyond kind of a family project, or whether it could really have a life, a life in festivals, a commercial life. And I showed it. I ended up talking to the producer, a woman who came on as a producer, Janet Gargi, and she was at a she was at a film conference, and I didn't know her, and I just walked up to her and I said, I have this idea, and I'll send you this little trailer for it. And she saw it and she loved it. And she said, I have a really good friend that I think would love this, this film, both because it's about science and math, but it's also because it's about our fathers. And I had a wonderful conversation with Nancy, and then she came on as an executive producer and helped us, with some of the funding that enabled us to finish the film. So it was a very fortuitous moment, but I think it was a real kind of meeting of the minds, and really, both, in terms of the subject matter, and in terms of the kind of the love and relationships to our fathers.
And Eddy, how did you feel about being filmed and the process of making this documentary?
I admire her work very much. I was kind of self-conscious that it was about me, but I cooperated, didn't I? Yeah. So it's very nice. I'm very proud of her. She's doing a good job.
Well, it really is a fantastic film, and I recommend everybody make sure you see it. Any other questions from the audience?
So yeah, there are multiple other questions, many related to the design work. One of the questions is, how do you decide to invest time in the project versus to letting it drop? What makes you stick with the project and invest more time and money into it? And related to that question also, how many of your toys end up being sold versus or produced versus that end up as a flop or don't even get to be sold to begin with?
Starting backwards, I think there's roughly 800 items that were on the market. Some of them were parts of a same line, you know, but hundreds of games and things like that. What was the rest of the question?
How many games do not get to be produced at all? So 800.
What's your batting average?
I've got 281 patents, and we've got roughly, they've counted about 800 items. My average of what I could sell,
right,
as against what was turned down.
Right.
First of all, I was very productive. I was able to sell a lot of items. I mean, I kept having successes, but I was turned down a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And as I tell people, if you want to be a successful inventor or writer or artist, you've got to learn to love rejection.
People are interested in your creative process.
Well, right now, for years that right now I live in a retirement area. So right now, everything is handled by Martin, and he's a very good marketing man. And I pass ideas past him, and he passes me ideas, but he picks the items and the projects to work on. And he has the final word in that now.
But you're still involved in inventing. You still go to the shop and you still make some prototypes. You're not retired that way.
But not just toys. I invent a lot of items for seniors. And I don't mean 70-year-olds. I mean seniors, you know, in their 80s and 90s. And these are to keep them from falling down and having accidents and things like that. And I built a lot of these for my wife. And so I still use them. And so I'm very busy with that. And I can relax. I have a hobby of writing short stories, mostly 100-word stories, which is a recognized hobby all over the world. So I keep very busy trying to be creative, and it helps. I'm 99 years old, so it's getting there.
When's your birthday?
September 5th.
And you turned
1921.
Turned 99?
Yeah.
So you're 99 now.
Yeah, I'm going to be 99 for the rest of the year.
The rest of the year. Okay. Well, you know, there's a lot of mathematicians out there.
Someone in the chat wrote that you are his or her hero. In general, people have been sharing their enthusiasm and just how amazing they find your toys and how that reminds them of their childhood and so forth. And another question: could you share with us a story about one of your flops, one of the toys that didn't make it?
Was there something you tried to sell and you just couldn't sell, or?
Oh yes, of course, yeah.
But you really thought was really good, and you still haven't even sold it.
I had an item that I thought it was really wonderful. And we spent a lot of time and made beautiful models. My wife, Anita, wrote stories about it. It was called Mr. Elevator. It was an elevator on wheels. And you can push it all around the house and lift things up from the floor to the table and stuff like that. And we thought it was a great item. And the only people who didn't like it were the toy manufacturers. No one would go for it. And as I said, that was kind of a real disappointment because we thought it was going to be really something. It was called Mr. Elevator. And if anyone is interested in that,
Still available.
call in.
So is there any surprises, anything that you sold that become a big hit that you didn't really think it would?
Well, yes, the bubble gun, which everyone turned down, I thought was going to be a good item, but it was just a huge...
You never realized how big it would be.
No, I had no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. And it's wonderful to get those items once in a while. And of course, the stompers lasted years and years and years and years, and had a very, very high volume. This was done by Shopper Toys and Bill Garrity. We became very close friends on it. He came to me, he was a banker, and his bank put him, they were taking over this toy company in someplace, and they put him in charge, and he had no idea what to do or what to make. And he came to see me and he said, I don't even have money to pay you. We can't pay in advance or anything. I said, I liked them really well. And I'd already sold the stompers to, oh my God, I can't remember the name, one of the big companies, and they screwed it up completely. They took this little car, and made it this big. And finally they called me and they said they don't know what to do. They're going to return it. And the next day, Bill Garrity came in and I showed it to him. I was sort of so disappointed, and he was totally inexperienced. But we took over all the work. We did all the tooling, patterns, everything, all the design work. As I said, that was all done by Del Everett and his group. At my place, of course. We did the actual design work because he had no people to do anything. And he became a big company. And he sold out for millions and millions of dollars. So his bank picked the best guy to go in there.
Any other questions from out there?
What do you do if something gets knocked off?
In other words, if your ideas get copied or knocked off, how do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, I owe a responsibility to the company that I license it to, but the company takes over immediately. They, as you know, they've put in a lot of money for tooling and advertising and what have you. So they have a tremendous stake in it. So I help them in any way I can and carry some of the expenses, but they usually take over fighting the case. And the biggest one we had was on stompers. It was so successful. Another company, as you know, or probably remember, copied it. And it almost went to the Supreme Court. It was crazy, absolutely crazy. And we finally won, and they paid a huge amount of money to the company. We have to protect the items, but I had very, very few problems over the years. Very few problems. And I never had a problem of a company stealing an item from me. So many amateur inventors or without any experience are afraid that companies will steal their items, where companies would rather pay them and hope that they can bring them another item, and certainly not antagonize them by stealing it. And the toy industry is a wonderful, honest family industry.
For one last question from the audience, how much input do you have in the artwork of your toys? So how much do you contribute to the design of the box set or the artwork that accompanies your toys and your inventions?
As I understand, you're asking how much artwork I contribute to the item?
Yeah, talk about the art.
Outside of my prototype?
Right. Do you sometimes help with the packaging or give an idea for packaging?
No. The only time we did it was with stompers, because Bill Garrity took over a company that should have been going bankrupt. He had no people. So we took over all the work that had to be done. And in about 2 years, he was able to handle the work himself. He built up a company and a wonderful staff, and he was able to handle it. So actually, as far as artwork, almost none with most items. When you sell an item to Mattel, or Ideal or Hasbro, as you know, they take over on the artwork and they do beautiful work.
Thank you very much, Eddie. It was really great.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you. I think this will wrap up our session. And everybody, make sure you see the documentary.
Thank you so much for all our panelists. Thank you, Mark, for moderating the session. Thank you, Eddie, for these amazing stories, and thank you, Lynn, for the video that I think everyone, the movie that everyone will want to see now and is very eager.
Thanks a lot, Tiago, and I'll see you, Lynn.
Yes,
And I'll see you, Mark.
Eddie, bye, everybody.
So I'm leaving now. Bye-bye.